the resonance will shift, but I guess when I say consistent, I just really mean keeping the vowel reasonably in check and the closure consistent.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Enables the transition to happen, but when the transition happens, you do feel a moving of resonance from here up into head.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, the better you get at transitioning, the less it feels like there's dramatic shifts happening. So you feel much more of a when it's clumsy. When it's not
Right.
When it's not clumsy, you're moving into head, but na 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 na. It doesn't really sound like anything dramatic's happening. Na 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 na. It just largely sounds like a continuation of the start of the scale. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. That's through the bridge, and it's not like a dramatic moment. Your understanding of it will evolve over time as you do it better. So really the best thing to say is, I think, that there is nothing anyone can explain to you that will make it clear in a way.
Okay.
Even the best coaches, like Brett Manning being one of them, is everything that they're saying is being funneled and translated through your understanding of it and worldview of it. So it's what will really cultivate your understanding is doing it better over time, and you'll find that it's not like overnight you're like, oh, I understand my mixed voice now. It's more that as you cultivate the skill set, your understanding will mature and evolve to where you be using the same way to explain it, but you understand like the deeper meaning behind what's being said.
I get that.
I guess another way of saying it is that language ultimately is relatively crude in explaining very nuanced, detailed things. Not so much, you talk about mathematics and millimeters and this type of thing. You can get very, very detailed in a sense, but there's a lot of like nuance in singing that language like struggles to really clearly translate between skill sets, as in somebody that's got a lot of skill and somebody that's got less skill. The concept of holding on or letting go, I don't know if I'm pushing or holding on enough, or am I letting go enough. This whole concept, it varies so wildly from individual to individual in terms of when it's correct, what they experience. I always thought when I mixed and got into head voice better, initially I felt like, I should be letting go and releasing and feeling no tension. And when I actually started to coordinate better, my experience was more like, I actually need to hold on more than I thought in a certain way. And so me listening to people saying you need to relax the throat and open the throat was actually contrary. It was actually the opposite of the information I would need. Now, that being said, some singers naturally coordinate well, but they do hold on with the right muscles a little bit too much.
Right.
So for them, when they coordinate with more balance, it really does feel more like, wow, I just have to release and let go and open my throat, and all of a sudden it feels so much more relaxed. And so my point being is that it really depends where you're at, what information is going to be exactly right or not. The paradox of being in mix and knowing what it feels like is that you can only truly feel it more as you get better at it. Right. Someone could so yes, and like as you get better examples of more consistent scales, like I can say, okay, this is better and this is worse, and all that's, it's got help just generally trying to guide you towards like feeling a sense of, okay, I've got to kind of, it's always an approximation. There is no like objectively totally like this is the perfect balanced mix and it's absolutely correct and everything else was wrong before this moment. You get into a better quality of mix. So the things that you do when you're like, I'm not sure if that's mixed or if this is mixed, they're all kind of variations on the theme of getting higher in a way. And we could get higher in different ways. Some ways are like more desirable and some ways are less desirable in terms of practical application to singing, where we want to make sounds of a certain kind. So when you make sounds that are kind of in the ballpark and they are higher and they are in head voice range, but they aren't necessarily like, they don't necessarily kind of round sounds, as in sounds that are, we're looking ultimately for a sound that has a reasonable balance of frequencies across the frequency spectrum. So if I have this as I go into my mix voice, like nay 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 nay, I am moving into head, and it's some kind of a sound at the top, but you can hear the shift in balance between the sounds.
Yeah.
Whereas if I was moving to the same place with more balance and in a sound that you could say would be more mix or more desirable, if I'm going nay 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 nay, it sounds overall like there's just more balance to the sound. It's not overly muddy, it's not overly bright. So you can kind of just think of a desirable mix initially as, does it generally have a consistent balance of frequencies, i.e. like, is it changing dramatically towards high frequencies and nasal frequencies?
Right.
Or is it changing towards, sometimes it can change towards like overly dark and muddy frequencies. You could have like people have this, it's like mum 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 mum.
Right.
And that again would work in a sense, but it's changing a lot, and it's like overly dark. So we're looking for some kind of a sense of a just somewhat consistent balance of frequencies. So in terms of making it simple as well, particularly when you start, is you don't want to get too bogged down in all the details, because in the end, like initially, it's just a case of learning about consistent closure, learning about just trying to keep vowels reasonably in check and how that might work. And then just doing stretches where you just go for a consistent sound. And just that, if you get those things, inevitably you'll get through your bridge reasonably well.
Right.
Literally, if I keep consistent closure and the vowel doesn't change much, there is no way you can not get through the bridge reasonably consistently. That being said, it's quite hard to do because it's so simple to say, but for most people, the vocal cords, the muscles attached to them, don't work in a way that is nuanced enough for them to maintain consistency. So hence why we're trying to keep you in a straitjacket initially, to not change things, so you can get a sense of like, oh, okay, all this other stuff is kind of just clutter, in the sense of, if I can't just learn to get these vocal cords to just kind of sit still, then I'm never going to really get into a mix that's going to be convincing, essentially. Discovering the CT muscles is, particularly for guys, one of the more challenging parts, because again it's a bit chicken and egg. How do you know how to do something you haven't done before? And most guys have engaged the CT muscles a little bit, but they haven't really felt like what it is to engage them a good amount. And and again, it's in a sense, initially we teach it indirectly, in that the vowels themselves, consistency of vowels necessitates engaging CT. So if you can keep the vowels consistent, that means you learn CT.
Interesting. Okay.
Whereas if you just try to engage my CT, what should that feel like? It's tricky. There are things there are prompts for it. Some people call it pressing in, or that it feels like yawning, which it does. Like if I yawn, if I go, ooh, this is CT engagement. Yeah. If I go, ooh, this is CT engagement.
Interesting. Okay.
So there are things that we naturally do where we engage CT that we probably haven't been aware of. But I would say outside of singing, the CT muscles, there's nothing we do day to day that has anything like the amount of CT engagement. So we probably day to day, particularly for men, we're probably maximum like 25% CT engagement. You know, if it's your arm, we maybe like lift it about that much day to day. And outside of that, if we don't sing, they just sit there. They don't do anything else. Women more so because they've got less chest voice, so they probably engage in like 50% of their CT day to day. Which is one reason why they have an easier time getting into head, because those muscles have been more active day to day for them throughout their lives. So they've got a little bit of a stronger like affinity towards them and and just intuitive feel for them. But yeah, for guys it's tricky because they just sit there doing nothing day to day or very little. So things like yawning can help, but if you can keep the vowel consistent, it requires you to hold on to more CT. So
I see.
You learn it indirectly. If you're struggling to figure out how do I hold on to more CT, just ask yourself, is the vowel consistent? Because if it is, that's the feeling of it.
That's super helpful. Yeah, because I know when I'm going from goo to a g sound, I feel like the larynx was brought up to try and hit that higher note, and so when I go back to goo, I got you. So it's that vowel consistency that pulls you into CT.
If I go goo 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 goo, yeah, this is inactive CT. And if I go goo 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 goo, yeah, that's active enough CT. You can basically think of the CT muscles effectively as just a balancing mechanism for the sound in general. And if there's enough of it, you know, we're talking about consistent stretch at the start, keeping everything in place, that requires, again, it's CT engagement. So even the concept of consistency is, the idea of it is to encourage more CT engagement. If there's not enough CT engagement and the vowel starts to splat and spread, it feels very much like the sound starts to get more and more trapped in the mouth. It feels like go 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 go. It feels like there's nowhere to go and the sound's just stuck here. When there's CT engagement, it feels very much like that we get to near that spot, but all of a sudden the sound, it starts to feel like we're creating more space for the sound to go, basically. So it doesn't go, it goes ooh, ooh, no, no, no. And it feels like that the resistance to the sound going higher is not there when there's more CT. Because the CTs are lengthening the folds. So, you know, in reality, we are creating more notes because we've got more CT engagement. And the resonance is really, resonant feeling of the resonance shifting is really just a byproduct of that stretch happening, because the resonance is just moving into smaller cavities as we go higher.
Gotcha.
But essentially, it feels like we're creating more notes, which is what's happening because the vocal cords are lengthening with the CT engagement. We're trying to learn CT engagement indirectly in a lot of different ways, but eventually we understand CT engagement directly, as in we just know how to pull on the CT muscles. But we can only do that once we know what it feels like to do that, hence why we've got to teach it indirectly, because it's, again, if you could just have a bunch of words that would explain it, it would be great. But unfortunately, CT's the hardest thing to teach and the hardest thing to learn, I would say, for most of us. This is why we have to find exercises to do it, because language is not equipped effectively. Just to get a sense, if you get a sense of, you know, in chest, you've got a good amount of balance with the closure there. But if I go like mum 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 mum, do that.
Mum 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 mum.
Yeah, it's a little low. If you do it here, mum 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 mum, as conversational as you can.
Mum 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 mum.
Yeah. Now, if I was gonna kind of break it deliberately, like mum 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 mum, do that, where you go deliberately trying to over squeeze on it.
Mum, 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 mum.
Yeah. Now clean that up. Mum, 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 mum.
Mum, 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 mum,
Yeah.
mum.
So, like, how much would you say that you're having to interfere with that to make it break?
Yeah, I'm definitely interfering. I feel like
But would you say it's
it's more.
quite like, would I guess what I'm trying to get across is it doesn't require much of a closure adjustment to really like dramatically like break the sound.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes.
What I'm trying to get at is this is when you're going through the stretch up higher and you're trying to engage lots of CT or just more CT. It's very easy for these types of subtle closure adjustments that break the sound to happen quite as in a way that's a little bit invisible because the amount of closure adjustment needed to make the closure fall apart is very small relative
Mm.
to the amount of CT engagement we need to get higher. So there's this asymmetry between the muscles that are working. Closure requires very delicate, gentle, consistent feel through the whole stretch all the time.
Hmm.
CT, the higher we go, the more tension we need. So as we get higher, the asymmetry between what the muscles are doing increases more and more. Closure still needs to be nice and relaxed and loose and gentle and precise, but CT is more and more and more tension the higher we go. So, one, this makes singing hard for people that lack the skill because this requires the muscles to be working in a way that's more independent than we're used to. But
Mm-hmm.
also, when we've got lots of tension in one muscle group, it becomes hard to feel subtle adjustment in the other muscle group until we get experience with it. My point being is when it breaks, when the closure gets like messy through the transition, a lot of the time it's going to be generally be because we are coming down and we're not really sensitive enough to these small closure adjustments, and because we've got a reasonable amount of sensation happening with CT, it kind of masks what the closure is doing a little bit for people,
Oh, I
because
see.
it's just there's something big to focus on versus this tiny little thing of like, oh, is the closure like perfectly in line as we're coming down, and it's like this very subtle part of the coordination, the closure always.
I get that.
So
Okay.
it makes closure tricky to monitor through the bridge.